Well, hello and welcome to Polity Matters. My name is Ben Ratliff, and I'm joined, as always, by my friends Scott Edberg and Jared Nelson. And we are here with you today to talk about internships. We are in BCO 19, so we're going to be starting in section 7. So as you gather yourself and collect your things and open up your books and turn to the PDF, and don't forget there's a great table of contents and downloadable PDF of the BCO. You can get the most recent 2024 edition and open up that table of contents, and there's even a mark under chapter 19 for B in 19 on internships. So turn right there, and while you're doing that, we're gonna check in with our fellas, and I want to know, gentlemen, tell me about your presbytery internships when you were coming up through. This is a requirement for ordination, so you have to have had one, however rigorous or not it may have been.
Well, I was licensed and I did my internship in North Texas. And there I was basically assigned a mentor that oversaw it. And the emphasis there really was on experience and being with that pastor and going through his daily routines and doing it with him. So whether it was going to do visits in the hospital or preparing a sermon and having him oversee that, there was just a lot that was emphasized on my interaction with that mentor and him kind of making sure that I did this checklist of things that I needed to do in order to have some experience in what it would be like to be a pastor. And so I know some will have a lot more papers and things like that. I think I had a couple that I basically reused from seminary and I turned in. But it was actually mostly an emphasis on the relationship with a mentor that they trusted and a checklist of things that I needed to go through. So at least that was my recollection. Now, I could be unfair to it because it was 14 years ago. So I've slept several times since then. So.
Yeah, my internship in Mississippi Valley was thorough. That's kind of how I would describe it. I was a bit overwhelmed what they sent me that I had to do before they would mark my internship as complete. They actually had different tracks, and like you could choose to like get it done in a year. You could choose to get it done in a few years, and then they had this special track at Mississippi Valley for Trinity Presbyterian Church only. I never understood why they had their own track, but they had their own track. And so I did the year track under Charlie Wingard's advice. He just said, get in there, get it all done as fast as you can. But the process was very cumbersome. Well, we had to have so many sermons preached with titles and outlines, so many lessons taught. We had to have so many hospital visits, home visits, and prison visits. We had to attend presbytery committee meetings. We had to attend session meetings, diaconate meetings, and even those at other churches, I think in 3 different churches throughout the presbytery. And you had to make reports on all of that. And so the actual, what you produce is pretty large. It just kind of, when you think about, a seminary's presbytery, how thorough it would be. But mine ended up being 42 pages, which may be a little longer than Jared's mythical intern checklist. But everything had a report. They were gracious to you. You were allowed to import so much of previous experience. And so if you had done some Sunday schools or preaching before you became an intern, they would comp you, but you could only comp up to half, and you had to do all the other half by the time you were done with your internship. And so it was a thorough process. Mine had a table of contents. That's how thorough it was. I had a table of contents for all my reports. How about you, Ben?
Well, Scott,
just to defend myself, I found my old checklist, and it wasn't just like a 1-page checklist. It was 2 pages. So.
Well, Scott, I did my internship in the same presbytery where you did yours, and I don't 42 pages. You must have used a smaller font. Mine was 121 pages long.
Brevity. You failed in the brevity department. Every report that they made me do, on baptism and the Lord's Supper, I said I'm only committing 1-page single space to this issue, And if they want more, they can ask for more.
Well, I think mine was double spaced, so that might be where we differed. We would meet
Yeah.
somewhere in the middle if we changed all that. It was wonderful. I don't know about Scott, but it felt nice to be well prepared for ministry. Good internship, good seminary. Oh, Jared's gone. I was going to tease him a little bit more. Oh well. So good to. Oh, there he is. There he is.
Are you getting your internship binder, Jared? Is that what you're
No,
doing?
it's just one page, but that front and back. So it can last anywhere from 2 to 121 pages, apparently. So
I I did appreciate
120 pages.
the flexibility they gave us. So like you, Scott, you were going through all the things that we had to do, and I remember distinctly. I probably wrote it down somewhere. Let me scan through this thing. Can't believe I still have this document. Like, prison visits. Well, my internship, where I did the work for my internship was with RUF at Belhaven. I was a part-time intern with RUF. So there were not a lot of opportunities to go visit prisons, in the normal course of ministry. And so my campus minister talked to our credentials committee, or I don't know who was taking care of us. I think it's credentials still back then. And they said, well, here, have him call and talk to a guy who runs a prison ministry and have a conversation, and that can count for some of this stuff. And so they were very kind in letting us adapt the requirements to the circumstance I was in. And it's funny that you mentioned Trinity, because I was going to bring it up. I don't know if it's because of this, but Mike Ross was the pastor at Trinity for a while. He was pretty hardcore. He was the minister there when I was attending Trinity back when I was younger. And I believe Ligon Duncan was an assistant there at some point as well. And I just wonder if the presbytery looks out and sees Mike Ross and Ligon Duncan at the same church and think, we don't need to keep track of what the guys at that church are doing for internships. If you go work there for a year, we'll count that as your internship. Which again gets maybe into the principles we talked about in our previous episode about how in a lot of these matters, the presbyteries have a lot of freedom to establish how they interpret these things, what standards they set. And we're going to see a lot of that as we discuss internships here in the second half of BCO 19. There's just a lot of reading in this one, guys. I'm going to apologize ahead of time
This is reading hour.
For all of you that like to go to sleep to Polity Matters. This is the episode. BCO 19:7. The Holy Scriptures require that some trial be previously made of those who are to be ordained to the ministry of the word, both concerning their gifts and concerning their ability to rule as teaching elders, in order that this sacred office may not be degraded by being committed to weak or unworthy men, and that the church may have an opportunity to form a better judgment respecting the gifts of those to whom this sacred office is to be committed. To provide for such a period of trial, a candidate for ordination must serve an internship. This period of internship shall be at least 1 year in length, and maybe longer at the discretion of the presbytery, so as to give sufficient time for the presbytery to judge the candidate's qualifications and service. This period of internship may occur during or after the candidate's formal theological education. When it occurs during his formal theological education, it may include an intern year in addition to his time of academic training, or it may run concurrent with his academic training. The nature of the internship shall be determined by the presbytery, but it should involve the candidate in the full scope of duties of any regular ministerial calling approved by the presbytery. It is to be both a time of practical instruction and testing by the presbytery, and may be in any work which the presbytery deems to be a suitable ministry to test the intern's gifts. The intern should be closely supervised by the presbytery throughout this trial period. Let me just say, I love the first paragraph of this portion of the chapter. The sacred office should not be degraded by being committed to weak or unworthy men. Let no one ever complain about the rigors of the ordination process. It is meant to be hard so as to keep weak and unworthy men out of the sacred office. Y'all may have thoughts. This is pretty self-explanatory, but what's important here?
I think of it almost like a residency. If you think of pastors almost as spiritual physicians, if you have ever been in a hospital, I worked for a year in one as a chaplain. These are, especially when you're talking about the doctors, they've gone to school for a long time. And then they have to do a year of residency in which they're actually under somebody else and they're not getting a job yet. And you would think that some of them would complain, I've already done 8 years worth of schooling. Why do I have to do another year? Well, You have to be put through those trials to say, can you keep up with this? And are you going to, be sloppy with your work because people's lives are on the line? And so we have to have the same attitude when we're looking at pastoral ministry. It's not just like, hey, what's the quickest we can get you onto the field? No, if we are spiritual physicians, we want to make sure that people with their preaching and their explanation and their counseling are not, in a sense, cutting arteries as they go. So that's how I think of internship. It's the spiritual residency of pastors.
Y'all see and hear the great flexibility given to the presbytery. They're charged with the duty of qualifying these men, or at least seeking to see to their qualification, and they've got flexibility in how they do so. 19.8, an applicant for internship must be a candidate and may be a licentiate in the presbytery in which he is seeking to become an intern. He may, however, become a candidate and an intern in the same meeting of presbytery. If an applicant for internship is already a candidate in another presbytery, that presbytery should dismiss him as a candidate to the presbytery in which he is seeking to become an intern. Jared, I don't know about you, but this seems to have presbytery clerk written all over it. Scott, what's this has got to be an important paragraph for you at some level.
An important paragraph for me.
Well, just in terms of if you've got a guy coming as a candidate or a licentiate or an intern, you've got to figure out if he's meeting the right combination or not.
Yeah, I think perhaps the best advice from this is that when you become a candidate and you're pursuing ordination, you should also become an intern. And so you can do candidacy alongside your internship. But I believe a licentiate has to actually have the internship completed, right? And so that changes the timetables for how that can come forward.
I don't think a licentiate has to have an internship complete. No, just for ordination. And and they can happen at the same time. Well, these are the three things that can all happen at the same time in theory. Ordination can't happen at the same time.
That's the deferral. My apologies.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would think as somebody that's an intern somewhere and you're wanting to go somewhere else, whether it's because of presbytery or because of seminary or because of working in another church, just make sure both presbyteries are aware of it and are talking to get these things sorted out. These are the things that we always deal with of like, wait, did the other presbytery dismiss them? And then did he talk to them or should we talk to them? Just make sure everybody's on the same page. I think this is just to get the presbyteries talking to make sure you're not just taking the candidate's word for it. They have to hear from the presbytery to figure out where he is on his 2-page checklist.
It's 2-page or 120 page.
There's an exam for internship in 19.9, our next paragraph. Before the applicant begins his period of internship, he shall give to the presbytery a written and or oral statement at the discretion of the presbytery of his inward call to the ministry of the word. This is the same kind of portion of other exams for candidacy or for licensure that you're going to see. And so in many cases, if you're a candidate or a licentiate already, this may be able to be waived because you've already testified to those things before the presbytery.
Well, I just had the same sheet that I sent for my internship licensure and for my ordination. So
yeah, it kind of weds well with the candidacy and why it's probably recommended. If you're going to go before the presbytery, you might as well get as much done, in my opinion, that you can get done. And so if you're going to become a candidate, you might as well become an intern if you can. You have to be under someone's oversight. And so if you're new to a place, it might be difficult for that. But if you have the approval of a session to make you a candidate, you might as well take the next step and get the internship process started. It doesn't mean you have to complete it in 1 year, but it does allow you to start racking up the experience needed to complete it. And so I think the internship part should not be delayed ever. You should, as soon as you can, in good conscience, become an intern of a presbytery, you should do that, because that will follow you most likely from presbytery to presbytery. No presbytery, I think, that I know would want to redo an internship if it's not needed. It's a little different than examinations where they may want to do that, but an internship is tedious to oversee in some regards. And so if it's already been well done, there's no reason to do it again.
My brother is in his second year at RTS Jackson right now, getting his MDiv, and he's an He's a candidate of Mississippi Valley, and just recently became an intern in Mississippi Valley because he started his internship. Actually, Scott, where you were in Yazoo City. But he got
The
became
center
a
of the universe.
That's right. You're not kidding. He became a candidate at one Presbytery meeting, and he came back to become an intern. So he didn't do it at the same meeting the way we're encouraging men to do. Shame on you, brother. But he became an intern at the next one. He didn't utter a single word on the floor of Presbytery when he became an intern. He stood up front while the chairman of the committee basically said, "This is Nathaniel. He's going to be an intern. Here are all the details." And the Presbytery approved it, and they gave him this next pronouncement that we're about to read, and he sat down. He did. It was anyway. So yeah. So it's worth doing as soon as you can, because it's becoming an intern, if you're already a candidate or a licentiate, is not difficult.
Yeah.
I have a question before we keep going that is on my mind, and it might come up later, but honestly, there's so many words coming up, I can't recall where this shows up. Presbytery internship and a church internship are not the same thing. So just because you're an intern at a church doesn't mean that you are actively fulfilling the requirements of a presbytery for an internship. And I think I would say, at least I'd be willing to vote this way in a meeting, you don't have to have an official internship at a church in order to be an intern of a presbytery. You could be, quote unquote, an intern at large. If the presbytery is approving you as a candidate for ministry and you don't have a place where somebody's paying you to be an intern at a church, but you have ways to fulfill the requirements like pulpit supply, Sunday school at your local church, depending on the context. You can pursue an internship with the presbytery even without an official paid or unpaid internship in a local church. I mean, how do you guys deal with that kind of thing?
Does
that make sense to y'all? Yeah.
You can add to that too. A lot of seminaries also have an internship program.
Yeah.
And so like you can be an intern at a local church, you have an internship you have to complete with the seminary, but you also additionally have an internship to complete with the presbytery. And all three of those things can be separate, and they might not all be unified. And so you can likely unify them if you put your trajectory, if you align them that way. But they are not necessarily that. You have to do the work to align them. And so I used all my internship work for Mississippi Valley for RTS, but you had to fill out a few different forms, do a few different assignments, but everything I did for the presbytery was then used in the seminary side of things. And so do less work, make less work for yourself by aligning all the work that you do when you're in seminary. If you can align it, you can get more done by doing less.
Be a hard worker, just do less. That would be our encouragement.
Work smarter, not harder.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Work hard. Yeah.
We're not advocating for the weak and unworthy men that we're protecting against. Yeah. It's funny you mentioned the RTS internship thing. That was the most confusing element of my seminary education, believe it or not, was like, there's this 1 hour course that you have to sign up for that is basically a checklist and like a 1 hour meeting towards the end of the semester. And if you missed it, you couldn't graduate. Anyway.
Charlie Wingard had me do that in my first year at RTS.
I didn't even know about it until my last year.
I was with all these people graduating, and I'm sitting there. I don't know any of them.
They're all sweating profusely, thinking they might not be able to leave school, and you're just happy and doe-eyed.
Just learning my Greek and Hebrew.
All right. 1910, when an applicant is approved for internship, the moderator of the presbytery shall offer a prayer suitable for the occasion and shall address the applicant, if present, as follows. In the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, and by that authority which he has given to the church for its edification, we do declare you to be an intern of this presbytery, and as a means of testing your gifts for the holy ministry wherever God in his providence may call you. And for this purpose, may the blessing of God rest upon you, and the Spirit of Christ fill your heart. Amen. And there's some notations there for the clerk. So if can you become an intern and not be present? It says he shall address the applicant if present. Does that mean you can become an intern of the presbytery without being in the meeting of the presbytery?
Well, it seems like according to the discretion here that it can be in written form. You don't have to be present.
That's a fair point.
You can make a writing of your own inward call, and you don't have to be there. I mean, the pronouncements are as much for you as for the presbytery and those who are within that jurisdiction, right? Like when the moderator pronounces on behalf of the presbytery that you are a licentiate, then that's letting everyone know in the room that, hey, you're fair game to come to their church as often
Yeah.
as they want for you to preach. And so it's broader than just the encouragement of those who are being
That's good.
licensed or completing their internship.
But men, don't miss it. Be present. Don't miss this meeting. All right. We're just gonna keep going until y'all stop me. 1911. Oh man, so much. When any intern shall have occasion, while his internship is in progress, to remove from the bounds of his own presbytery into those of another, the latter presbytery may, at its discretion, on his producing proper testimonials from the former, take up his internship at the point at which it was left, and conduct it to a conclusion in the same manner as if it had been commenced by itself. Presbytery may repeat any portion of the previous presbytery's examination it desires. When God gives the intern the providential opportunity to serve the church, and to receive part of his training within the bounds of a presbytery other than the one in which he has been declared an intern, the presbyteries involved may develop a cooperative agreement to assure the proper training of the intern. In such cases, the home presbytery retains the final responsibility for and authority over the internship, but may rely to any extent considered necessary and proper in the circumstances on the assistance of the sister presbytery. When regular preaching of the word is involved, care must be taken to comply with BCO 19:1. Sister Presbytery. All right. What's going on? Scott, did you do this? Were you a candidate or intern of one presbytery and became one in another, or because you switched denominations, it didn't work that way?
Yeah, I was investigating becoming a member of Chicago Metro. I attended maybe 3 or 4 meetings my last year at Moody, so all their quarterly meetings, but I was moving south and my relationships weren't deep enough to warrant having, to come back every year to report. So I didn't know anyone and it just didn't seem wise. And so I became a member afresh at First Pres in Mississippi and then became an intern there. I know a guy that was in Providence Presbytery, Jonah Hill, who was a friend of mine, also at First Pres in the center of the universe. And he was a member in like a quasi member of both, working out what this passage talks about in the BCO, where he did come before us every year. I looked forward to my winter meetings in Providence because I knew he would be there, and I just loved catching up with him in the ministry. But I've not known it personally.
Apologies to our listeners. We jumped into a discussion of something without really explaining what's going on here. So there's something happening here dealing with when an intern has a relationship with 2 presbyteries. And so one is when he's moving to a new presbytery. That's possible, basically, is what it says. And the second paragraph of 1911 is explaining that if an intern wants to serve in another presbytery, he can retain his relationship with his first presbytery, and fulfill the requirements of his internship. Is our friend Ben Coppers somebody that did this? I feel like when we were in school, Ben had his membership and internship in a different presbytery and was doing some work in Mississippi Valley area, but was retaining his membership.
During that time, Ben was a part of the Shadowlands. He was in the mainline Dutch Reformed Church.
I'm so sorry. I'll have to cut all this out then.
And so you're just like you're strikeout. You don't know what you're talking about.
Y'all realize when I say I'm going to cut it out means I'm probably not going to cut it out, just for the record. Mostly because I'm lazy.
He was in the Dutch Reformed tradition, and you had to go to their seminary for at least a little of it. And so he had to go to the main line to learn like church history and polity. And so he has some quirks to him, but they're not these quirks.
Are we gossiping? Is this information we're allowed to give? I don't. Okay.
Feel like it.
Jared's just enjoying sitting back.
Saying nothing.
Just chilling.
Well, Jared, was this your experience? And did you transfer from a presbytery?
Do you have any comments on this? I'm just trying to throw stuff at the wall and see if something sticks. So,
no comment.
Thanks, guys. All right, 1912. Presbytery should require interns to devote themselves diligently to the trial of their gifts, and no one should be ordained to the work of the ministry of the word until he has demonstrated the ability both to edify and to rule in the church. Reports on every intern in the presbytery should be presented at each stated meeting of the presbytery by the committee of presbytery charged with the oversight of interns, and these reports shall become a part of the minutes of presbytery. The presbytery shall also require every intern himself to make a report to it at least once a year describing his ministerial experiences. If the intern is still in school, the presbytery shall secure from his instructors an annual report upon his deportment, diligence, and progress in study. So pretty much the presbytery's got to oversee these interns, and the reports from the committee and from the intern himself and presumably from his instructors are aiding the presbytery in this effort.
Yeah, they need to be diligent to do this on a regular basis, and then know that you're going to have to go to at least one presbytery meeting a year as you're doing this. So some of this is on the intern themselves to say, be on top of this. Don't make the chairman have to email you of like, hey, it's tomorrow. Can you please give me this report?
Yeah. I'm curious how y'all read this and what you do in your own presbyteries. So it says the presbytery requires every intern himself to make a report at least once a year describing his experiences. We only require written reports from our interns, so they're not required to be at the meeting to give an oral report. I know in Mississippi Valley, I believe they actually require their interns to stand up in the presbytery meeting and report orally as well as written on their work. What's going on in Ileana and wherever it is that you are, Jared?
We don't have any interns in Ileana.
In Ascension, in Ascension.
Thank you.
It's I believe just a written report to the committee that has oversight over it. And I think that's the minimum that's here. It's not that the presbytery has to receive this, although they can, but that the committee that has oversight is reporting on them. They can tell the presbytery, we receive reports and they're doing fine.
That's how it was in Providence as well. It sure makes the meeting go by a lot quicker. If you're wondering, when you have like these things where every meeting this adds a lot of minutes. I love Mississippi Valley, but those meetings were from like 8 to 5 p.m. And so they were always long, and part of it was because they were thorough in that regard.
Well, and they were big. I mean, our meetings
were large.
Our meetings are that
They were
long.
large.
It's just because we've got a lot happening. 1913. Man,
Oof.
sometimes it's sorry.
We can't even get through the recording of this. How are people going to listen to this, Ben? Last week's recording on the first part of this was so much easier.
Well, one way people get through is they can skip to chapter markers, and I'll remind our listeners that we have chapter markers available if you'd like to skip ahead to any other part of this episode. Also, they can put us on 1.1, 1.2, 1.25, 1.752, 3 even times speed if they want to. If you listen in the app that I like, which is Overcast, you can hit a button that cuts the silences, which in Polity Matters is a great benefit. You could save 5 minutes listening to us if you have an app that will cut the silence out of episodes.
Today's sponsor for Polity Matters is Overcast.
Oh man, I wish he does good work. Y'all get Overcast and listen. 1913 of our BCO. At the end of the period of time set by the presbytery for his internship, an intern shall have his internship either approved or disapproved. Even if it is approved, he cannot be ordained without a call to some specific work. If the internship is disapproved, the presbytery may either extend it for another definite period of time, or it may completely rescind his intern status and may revoke his internship. If the intern shall devote himself unnecessarily to such pursuits as interfere with a full trial of his gifts, it shall be the duty of the presbytery to rescind his intern status and to record its reasons therefor in the minutes of presbytery.
This keeps an intern in front of the presbytery. You have to, at the time that you said that it was going to be done, do something with it. And if the guy is working at Chick-fil-A as a manager or something like that, that's great work, but it's not, if he's not doing anything with his internship in the past 6 months, the presbytery might say, look, this doesn't seem to be what your focus is right now. If it changes, let us know. So it just forces the presbytery, I think, to do something with it rather than keep somebody in limbo. And you have this intern for 3 or 4 years. It can't be like Pam and her fiance, the 3-year engagement that never ends.
Yeah, working at Chick-fil-A unnecessarily, we may want to say. Like, if he's got to have a side job in order to make ends meet and take care of his family, and he can do his internship, that's great.
But that doesn't count as fulfilling your intern. Like, I'm doing counseling with the people that are ordering chicken sandwiches, you know?
Yeah.
That reminds me of a guy in Mississippi Valley who was a student in RTS for like 8 years. Great guy. I really do like him. But he had all his internship stuff done, but he still had to do his yearly reports. And they don't usually ask you any questions in these oral reports, but this guy had been doing it for 8 years. And so one of the presbyters stood up and he said, I don't mean this to be offensive, but are you ever going to be ordained? And perhaps that's getting at some of this is like, are you working towards this? And he was just a full-time worker on top of seminary with a full family. And so he was doing the slow route. But this helps us navigate some of that issue.
Sponsoring this episode, the Presbytery of Mississippi Valley. Wonder how many times we can talk about them.
The greatest presbytery in the PCA.
I mean, I guess two of us went through there, so why not talk about it? 1914, an intern who during his internship is to serve a congregation in the capacity of the minister of the word must be called by the congregation in the same way that a regular minister is called. A congregation may later call such a man as its pastor. This call must be approved by presbytery prior to the time of ordination. In the event a congregation does not desire to call such a man as its pastor as determined by congregational vote, notice should be given as early as possible. Interns may be called to serve as assistants to ministers during their internship by the session of a church with approval of the call by the presbytery. This may be a lesser known portion or maybe even a lesser exercised portion of our book. An intern serving as a minister of the word in a congregation, very similarly looking to a pastor. The assistants of ministers may be used more often, but what do y'all know about this? Have you had any experience with this?
I think this would be like a stated supply, but he's student stated supply or intern stated supply. And it can be really helpful in times that you have a dearth of pastors that are available and the church is, saying for his internship, he's just going to stay here, but it doesn't guarantee at the end of that he's going to be called as pastor. So I think it's a good tool for presbyteries or times in which there's a low number of pastors around that it can be a real help to the church and to the intern. But just knowing that you're stated supply there and it's not guaranteeing anything.
Yeah, and you'd already be licensed in this regard, right? If you're going to be the one that is ministering weekly.
Yeah, you'd have to
you'd be licensed to do so.
1915. Some restrictions. It says the intern may be asked by the moderator of a session temporarily to chair the meeting of the session. In such cases, the moderator shall supervise this activity and may overrule the intern or reassume the chair at will. The intern is not a member of the session and may not vote in the meetings unless he has previously been ordained a ruling elder and elected to the session by the congregation. Normally, he shall serve in an advisory capacity to the session and diaconate when he has been called to work out his internship by a congregation. He shall have the right to conduct funerals. An intern may not administer the sacraments. He may serve on committees of the church he serves. What are you laughing about, Jared?
I'm just having this image of the intern that's like, hey, you can moderate this meeting. Is like, oh, and then he has to reassume control from him and reassume the chair and just take it from it. I don't know. That was just going through my mind during that of an intern that gets a power trip because he becomes moderator of session for a day.
Oh, man.
Well, yeah, I'd given you some restrictions too. I mean, that the intern he's doing these fulfilling these things, and they have a kid in the meantime. Can't baptize your kid before you're ordained. Sorry. I mean, it's giving you some restrictions here of things that come up, and in fact, somebody that's going pursuing the ministry, that happens a lot, and so I think this is helpful to be like, yeah, you can do some preaching, you can do some of these duties, but just realize until you're ordained, you cannot perform the sacraments.
I don't know how much of this was intentional, but it does strike me here that he's allowed to conduct funerals. And in some of the churches where, at least currently, some of the churches that might be so small they can't have a full-time minister, but they can have an intern supply or something. Usually those churches have many elderly folks, and usually those churches have a lot of funerals. And so this enables the man who's helping that congregation, even if he's just an intern, to conduct those funerals.
Notice again, it doesn't say you can conduct weddings.
Yeah.
And a lot of that depends on state law. At least in the states that I've been in, the state law is if you are a minister or a minister of word and sacrament in your denomination, you can perform a wedding. And even though we are two office, the only minister of word and sacrament is a teaching elder in the PCA, not an intern, not even a ruling elder.
Plus, how would you administer the private mass to the couple in the wedding if you couldn't administer the sacraments? So,
Parody.
I want it on the record that I got a laugh out of Jared on that one. All right. He chuckled. All right. 1916. This is our last part here. Here we go. Where circumstances warrant, a presbytery may approve previous experience which is equivalent to internship. This equivalency shall be decided by a 3/4 vote of presbytery at any of its regular meetings. Such equivalent experience shall be decided only after the presbytery's internship committee has determined and reported that the candidate has met the following requirements. A, he has had at least 1 year of experience in compatible ministry. B, he has satisfactorily performed all the full scope of ministerial duties. C, he has the manifest approbation of God's people in the local church as having the requisite gifts for the pastoral ministry. You don't have to do it all after your presbytery meeting where you become an intern. You can have some things follow you, and the presbytery can count these towards your internship. Scott, you referenced it earlier. I think in Mississippi Valley, it was you could have previous experience, but they only let you use up to 50% of the requirements that they had for us. So we had to do at least 50% of our work in the presbytery at the time of our internship. Anything here?
I want to know Jared's thoughts on good faith subscription now.
Now that he's not there. Oh, how convenient that he happened to get up and walk away.
We should have just
arrived home.
Well,
You
we
have
were
children?
asking your thoughts on something. Did you hear what we were talking about? Could you hear us when you were welcoming your children?
Do you only give your children a front and back page for their internships, or is it more more in scope for them in order to graduate from your home?
Well, continuing on the conversation that I obviously was listening to, this is, I don't know, I'm lost.
We were just talking about how presbyteries can approve previous experience.
Oh yes,
yeah.
Which sometimes they will. You might have a guy. In fact, I think there was a man just now recently ordained at Mississippi Valley as a church planner, but he was a minister in a different denomination, and he went through the whole. And I'm sure that I would imagine that they probably counted a lot of his previous experience towards his internship requirements. We've had that happen in Covenant before. You have a guy coming who served as an independent Baptist minister for a while, and while he needed some schooling on theology, he had lots of ministry experience that could be counted for his internship purposes. Yeah,
but I think it's important to look at the A, B, and C. That you can't just have somebody that like, hey, I led a Bible study. Sure, that counts as your internship. It needs to be equivalent. And the 3/4, I think, helps to be, the presbytery really has to think that it counted for his internship.
Well, what do we need to say about internships? Any advice out there you'd give to men out there, I mean to say, about internships or as they think forward about their desire to serve?
If you intend to go to seminary, become a candidate as soon as you can in your local presbytery and ask for all this information. Typically credentials, the credentials committee has a packet of information of some sort to offer you to fill out forms and to get you set up. You don't need to wait to do some of this. Talk with your sessions, talk with the clerk of the presbytery, talk with the credentials chair, and get the ball rolling earlier than later. Even if you're not in seminary yet, start all of this as soon as you can, and some of it will carry with you through seminary.
That's a good word. Well, as
Mississippi Valley Presbytery would say,
hey, you know what? I like it. Thanks for joining us. If you're interested in learning more about anything that we've mentioned, check out our show notes in your podcast player or at politymatters.org. If you've enjoyed the show,
the Mississippi Valley website.
That's right. Yeah. I doubt we're on there yet, but maybe they should be on our website at this point, as much as we talk about them. Find us on Twitter, Facebook, follow us. We're all at Polity Matters on there. Subscribe in your podcast app of choice. Go to Buy Me a Coffee and become a member. We're going to have special stuff probably coming down for members over there who help support the show. If you have questions or comments, you can contact us at politymattersfeedback@gmail.com or on any of our social media outlets, and you can check out the show notes for all the links for all these things we've said out loud. We are so glad that you spent time with us. Until next time, say goodbye, gentlemen.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Y'all take care.